Perfect. So I'm Vanessa. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Virtual Interview 101 series. So I'm a sixth-year PhD candidate in the Neuroscience Graduate Group, and today we have the pleasure of talking to Dr. Shin, Associate Professor of Microbiology at Penn, and so she's going to actually give us advice from the faculty perspective on virtual interviews. And so, hi, Sunny. How
Hi,
are you?
Vanessa. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And so our first question is, how should students prepare for the virtual interview?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I recommend that ahead of time that the students take time to um, think about the research that they've done in the past, because of course a lot of the questions will be focused around their research experiences. So take time to review your research, think about how you're going to describe your research to somebody not familiar with your research in
Right.
5 to 10 minutes. Um, and the other thing I think that's important is to do a little bit of research about the school that you're interviewing with. So usually you would have you looked into the school when
Hmm.
during the application process, but I think it's good to take time to think a little bit more about some faculty you might want to work with in the future, and also um, you'll get a schedule of who you're going to meet with. So take a little bit of time to um, do some reading ahead of time about the faculty's research. Um, and I think the other thing I always recommend to students is if you're able to take time to practice, so do a mock interview with your fellow students or with your faculty advisor, and just to get that feeling for how to interview virtually.
Yeah, that's great. I think one question that some students have is, so when talking about the research, if they have different experiences, different like summer research experiences, do you prefer for them to start off with their main research experience or kind of give you the elevator pitch for the, few different ones, and then you'll ask in depth, or how would you recommend for students to approach that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So every faculty member is different. I actually usually ask the student myself, why don't you tell me about your most significant research experience, right? The most recent one. But other faculty will leave it very open-ended, like what you just described. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good idea to ask the faculty member, oh, what would you like to hear about? Do you want to hear about all three of my research experiences, or about
Right.
the the longest or most significant one, or the one I'm most excited about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good, yeah, because I feel like sometimes students just want to then talk, right, a lot, and then so making it a conversation will help, also ease the nerves of the
I
students.
think so, and I think you hit upon a really important point, that think of it as a conversation, not just
Hmm.
a series of questions that are being thrown at you. So try to make it a conversation and have fun with it.
Yeah. And so kind of going off of that, what's your favorite question to ask a student during the interview process?
Yeah, I have a couple. So of course I love asking about their research,
Hmm.
but I think one thing that I like to get a feeling for during the interview process is how they think about their science, like how they approach thinking about science in general. And so usually when students talk to me about their research, I'll often, not often, but I'll sometimes interject and ask them questions about, oh, like, how do you think about that result or finding that you came across? And I'll often ask them questions about what they want to do next, right? So, they'll often describe a project that they completed over the summertime or that may be still ongoing, right? But they'll tell me about what they found so far. And then I'll ask them, well, what are the next experiments that you want to do? What would you do in the future if you had more time in the lab? Just to get
That's
a
a good
feeling
question.
for,
Hmm.
their enthusiasm for the project, and if they're actually thinking beyond what they're just doing in the lab, if they're, actually spending time intellectually thinking about their projects.
Right. Yeah, those are great questions. Um, and so my next question is, what advice would you give a student to stand out and make a good impression during these virtual interviews?
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good question too. Um, so I think for making a good impression, I think it really helps if the students really show interest in the institution that they're interviewing in,
Mm-hmm.
and also in the faculty member that they're talking to. And so I've always been impressed by the students who actually take the time to look up my research and take time to read my papers, right? I mean, not they
Hmm.
don't have to read them in depth, but if they take time to skim them over, and so they're somewhat familiar with my research, and so that
Right,
way, after they finish talking about their own research, they can ask me questions about my research to show interest.
right.
And I think that it's always helpful if they're, asking questions proactively about the institution also, right? What does a faculty member like about the program or institution? I think
Yeah,
that helps, to show that you're really engaged and interested in the school.
yeah. I think that's a good point in terms of, like asking about what the faculty like about the program, because then you also get a sense of, what the program is like, right? As you interview multiple people in that
Yeah,
program.
because I think one thing that students sometimes forget is that with this interview process, of course, you're the one being interviewed, so of course you get very
Hmm.
nervous about it. You want to make a good impression, but you should also see it as, you're interviewing the institution and,
Hmm.
trying to figure out if that's institution is a good match for you, right? Is that a
Right.
place where you can envision being happy for the next 5 to 6 years? And so you should try to get as much information as you can from the faculty and the students. And
Right.
most faculty are usually very happy to talk about those things outside of
Yeah.
just research.
Yeah. Well, that was all great advice. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add about the virtual interview process now that you've probably interviewed maybe a few students, but
Yeah, I think that the other piece of advice I like to mention is to, just show some, enthusiasm and, interest, as I mentioned earlier. Especially when you're talking about your research, right? I think it's important
hmm.
to show that you're enthusiastic about science. The other thing that comes up a lot, I think, with interviews is that faculty often want to know, why is it that you want to pursue a PhD now? And what do you want to do with your PhD after you graduate? And so even if you don't have a clear idea of what exactly you want to do after graduate school, I think it's important to have at least some, idea of what it is, right? Whether you're someone coming straight out of undergrad, right?
Hmm.
And it seems like the next logical step because you do want a career in research in either academia or industry or some other field, or people who are, research technicians, right? That comes up too, right? You have a pretty comfortable job. Like, why do you want to leave your job as a technician
Right.
in academia or industry and get a PhD now? So I think it helps to take time to think a little bit about that and have a good answer for that.
Yeah. I think that at least the mock interviews that I've done with, prospective students, that's one of the questions I ask them is why a PhD, right? Or why that program? Because, yeah, I feel like that's a common question that they'll get asked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I think another question that comes up too is, related to why that program. Like sometimes people are switching fields, right?
Hmm.
Um, for example, for the program I'm involved in, the microbiology program, um, sometimes students are coming in with no microbiology research experience. They did research in developmental biology or cancer biology, and they want to
Hmm.
switch into microbiology. And so it helps to come prepared with an answer to that question also. So why are you switching fields?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I remember I did actually research in undergrad with developmental biology focused, and then I went into neuroscience. So I also got that question.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. But yeah, thank you so much for giving us all this advice. It's invaluable because you're on the admissions committee and you have gone through the process now, probably with these recent interview weekends. So thank you so much for yeah, being part of this series.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. And I just want to say to everyone out there, good luck with your interviews and just try to have fun with it and, focus on finding the right graduate school for you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sunny.
Thank you.